Hi, I'm Joe, and this is the Decahedron RPG Podcast. Hi everyone, no James this week, and that's because this show was actually recorded on January 6th when I was out of town in Niagara Falls. This is the second half of the show that we started last week. When I was recording it, I just went really long in what I was saying, so I decided to split it up into 2 episodes. Because I was out of town, I was in a hotel room, and the sound quality for the show is not that great, and for that I apologize. But in any case, this is a mail call episode, so let's get to it.
Mail call from the United States of America.
This week we have a couple of emails from Sam, but first we're going to start with a voicemail from Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Podcast. And this is Jason commenting on my interview with a new gamer who just happened to be my daughter Heather. Let's listen to Jason.
Hey, Jason. Your interview with Heather. I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, it's great to hear that, you know, the comments of people that aren't regular podcasters and aren't the normal voices in the hobby. I thought she had some great comments, and it's exciting, you know. So maybe I would be interested, maybe, you know, 6 months down the line or at some point down the line, revisit and recheck in where they're at in the hobby, you know. I know I'm not even going to mention about 5e and, you know, this rising tide raises all ships, because currently the message may age badly, but currently there's a big media concern with Wizards changing some policies that may negatively impact a lot of companies. So I don't know if 5e is going to raise all ships anymore. But I am excited for new players to come in the hobby and to find other games and to enjoy the hobby, whether they just play 5e or whether they expand out and play these older games and other games that are out there. It's exciting to get new people in the hobby. So thank you for doing that interview. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to everything you guys do this year. So take care of yourselves, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too, and I'm glad you enjoyed the interview with Heather. Yeah, that's actually a good idea to have her come back. I'm going to have to ask her, and I think next time I will have her husband, Keith, join us if he is willing. He's a pretty great guy. You hear a lot of dads talking about, you know, that boy's not good enough for my daughter. No, Keith is a great guy, and if you look at him just right, he looks a lot like Ron Weasley from Harry Potter movies. Anyway, that's a great idea to have them on. I have not heard whatever controversy you're talking about Wizards' new policies, unless you're talking about, I saw a lot of chatter where people were complaining that the new version is not going to be under the OGL. And, you know, 5e wasn't under the OGL when it first came out either. They waited like 2 or 3 years before they released SRD that was OGL'd. So I'm not really that worried about it. Of course, I'm not worried about what happens anyway, because I have Lucky 7 that I'm making. I have a whole bunch of old games from the past. White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure game is my current favorite OSR clone, and nothing's going to change that. So I'm not really too concerned where D&D goes, other than, as you said, if we lose that tide that raises all ships, will it be bad for the hobby? Maybe. When 4E came out, that didn't have any sort of OGL attached to it, and that's what made Pathfinder come out. Maybe there will be a 5e replacement that someone comes out with that will catch the world on fire. I'm not concerned. I think RPGs are here to stay. That's all I have to say about that. Again, thanks for the feedback, and that's a great idea about asking Heather to come back. I will have to do that. We have more email from Sam. Sam says, Paladins, Clerics, and Wizards are usually my favorite character archetypes. I'm surprised to hear that the Paladin was your least favorite class, and that the Y was skipped. That said, I can very quickly identify my least favorite class of the bunch of 5e. That said, I know that in the original rules, the Paladin is quite different from some of the more modern versions, and I think some of the restrictions that existed in the old version feel very dated and unfun. He goes on. Let me just address this before I go on. So first of all, I'm going to say in the Heather episode, I kind of said something about I called 5e a Munchkin-y game. That was very tongue-in-cheek. If you were listening and you didn't catch that, not you, Sam, the audience in general, I apologize, but no, that was very tongue-in-cheek. Everybody has their own game. You play what you like, and I'm happy for you. Why the Paladin is my least favorite character class? To me, the Paladin, well, I'm going to use that word again, is a Munchkin-y class. At least it was in the old days. I don't know what 5e looks like. It was just a very overpowered class for what it did. But more importantly, it doesn't have a niche that it fills. In essence, your Paladin is your holy warrior, but we already have a holy warrior. It's called the Cleric. In fact, in the first edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, in the Player's Handbook, it says that the Cleric bears a certain resemblance to religious orders of knighthood in medieval times. So kind of like the Knights Templar and such. So if you're looking for your fighting holy man, it's right there. It's your Cleric. Now, okay, say if we do that, then we don't have our just holy man who's not a fighter. So we want to do that with the Cleric. We want to make your Cleric the holy man who's not necessarily a good fighter. And then that's where I say, then if you want to play your holy warrior, just multi-class. Play a Cleric fighter. Bam, done. You do not need a whole nother class. And yes, I will say, if you want to play a ranger, you don't need a class for that either. If you want to play your woodland fighter with magic woodland powers, play a fighter druid multi-class. Bam, done. No need for another class. I like keeping things simple. I like every class to fill a niche, and so both the Paladin and the Ranger do not fit in there. Also, it was never mentioned, James did ask me, but my favorite class these days is Cleric. If I were to sit down and play, I would roll up a Cleric. When I was younger, I was a magic user. I've never been very attracted to fighters. Maybe because I'm not a fighting type guy. Anyway, let's see what else Sam has to say. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, Sam says, I think newer editions have done a better job at differentiating the Paladin by giving them access to spells that fit their place more than just Cleric spells. They also changed it so instead of getting their powers from their devotion to their god, they get them from an oath they've taken. That's the power of loyalty in the oath that gives them strength. Okay, I have nothing to say to that. And Sam says that my personal pick of the least interesting to me classes are the Barbarian and the Monk. They feel like angry fighter and punchy fighter. That's actually what I was kind of saying up there about Paladin, Sam, is that I think every class should have a niche that it's filling. As you're saying, these are just two different types of fighter with a different skin on them. And, well, let's see what you say. They feel like angry fighter and punchy fighter. They do get features that differentiate them, but they don't seem like they make me feel powerful. And the fantasy of portraying them is uninteresting to me. No, I agree. They are pretty much a fighter with a different skin on them. I think they were both influenced by media at the time. The monk class goes way back, way back, and I think it came from the Twin Cities, right? It was not a Lake Geneva thing. Anyway, way back then, probably before your time, Sam, there was a TV show called Kung Fu that starred John Carradine. No, Keith Carradine? John Carradine. David Carradine. It starred David Carradine. And, and he was a Shaolin monk who was trapped in the Old West and went town to town kicking butt while being a pacifist. In Dave Arneson's campaign, one of the players wanted to play a monk, and bam, so they made the monk. And the Barbarian showed up in... When did it show up? Was it AD&D First Edition Player's Handbook? And that, of course... Gygax was a huge fan of the Conan stories, and so there you have Conan. In fact, I think that was even after the Conan movie came out. So there you go. Someone fact-check that for me, by the way. Was that after the Conan movie? And then... That was all Sam said in that email, but he sent me another email, and this one was when I was talking to Heather from the Heather interview. And he says, do you view Munchkin as synonymous with Power Gamer? Yes, that's exactly what a Munchkin is. You were talking about your daughter's character sheet, and it sounded very normal for the 5e system. Yeah, actually, I referenced this email when I was talking to her during the interview. So I guess this came out before this must have been, you must have sent this when I was saying I was going to do the interview. They often use point buy or standard array, which ends up with stronger characters than 4d6 drop 1. See, I find that interesting because I think 4d6 drop 1 is already a very Munchkin-y system. I'm very much a fan of the 3d6 in order, although I'm not all that opposed to shifting them around where you want, except everything gets a little too samey when you do that. I'm not opposed to it because it let you play the character you want. I'm opposed to it because everyone starts looking the same. Every fighter has their highest score in strength. And I think it's just so much more interesting when your highest score is not in your prime attribute. Like a fighter with a high charisma, and that actually makes so much sense because the charisma is your ability to attract your men at arms who follow you around, and that's just something that's not used that much anymore. But I mean, Arthur had the Round Table. He had his Knights of the Round Table because he had that charisma. Robin Hood had his Merry Men because he had that charisma, not because he had a high strength. In fact, when you look at the Robin Hood legends with the Merry Men and everything, Little John seems to actually be the stronger and the better archer of the group. So it's about the charisma. And so that's why I like 3d6 in order. It's not because I want people to play weak characters. It's because I think that it makes more interesting characters. And I think that's an effect of the earlier editions when, if you look at original D&D, the 1974 rules, the bonuses you get for high attributes are almost nothing. It's like a +1 or a -1. I'm oversimplifying it because every single attribute had its own rules. Having your low score didn't necessarily make you a horrible fighter. It made you a little bit worse. But I mean, a -1 on a D20 is a 5% difference. So 95% of the time, your low strength didn't make a difference. Right? It made for a slightly more interesting character, in my opinion. That is why I like that. So where are you going? Drop 1 in similar systems. The point I'm mostly getting at, this is Sam speaking, by the way. The point I'm mostly getting at is that your daughter is not a Munchkin individually. She's not a Munchkin at all. I was saying that to tease, as I keep saying over and over. If everybody wants to play characters with straight 18s, and that works for you, and you think that's fun, do it. It's not my thing. I use the Munchkin term because that document that I linked to in the show notes for that episode, it is a thing of legend in gaming circles. And it's just a funny document. And so I use that to reference that. And of course, Munchkin, that's the Munchkin card game by Steve Jackson Games. It's based on the same thing. Anyway, she instead exists in a system which helps player create characters that are good at what they need to be good at. And that's because, again, the rules give you higher pluses and minuses these days. Sam continues, it prevents the want to play a wizard but roll 6 on their intelligence. Too bad. I guess you can't do what you want. Is that a thing? Do wizards have a minimum intelligence score in 5e? They did not in the original 1974 rules. They did not, I don't think, in AD&D. I know that they didn't like Holmes and Moldvay and all the so-called basic D&Ds. Other characters like Paladins did, and that's something I disliked. I actually did the math once about what your chance was of rolling up a Paladin. I should maybe dig that out of my blog and do that as a solo episode sometime. In the old editions, if you wanted to play a wizard but only had a 6 for your intelligence, you could. In AD&D, you would have fewer spells, but you could still do it. And I think that would be a beautifully wonderful character. Sam continues, one of the worst D&D experiences I ever had was in a group that rolled stats where 2 players were blessed with 18s, 19s. 19? What kind of game are you playing there, Sam? Which edition allows you to get 19? Is that a 3E thing? I don't remember that being in 3E. 4E? 5E? Anyway, in the primary stats, and I had 2 12s, one of which became a 14 after racial modifiers. Between the one sweet-talking his way through every encounter and both of them bulldozing in combat, my presence in the game felt inconsequential at best. A lot that came down to how I played my character and that it wasn't people I was very close with, but I had a couple bad tastes in my mouth from rolling stats. Again, that sounds like that's an effect of the newer editions where stats sound like they are much more important than they were in the older edition. So if the game is based on that, then you got to do that. And having said all this, well, let's see what else you said. I've had several positive experiences with it too, but that was my most recent time trying it. So I will say, having said all that, what I just said, my favorite approach is actually a point-buy system. When I left D&D back in the 80s, I traveled around to a few weird games here and there. Dragon Quest and... what was the other one? Dragon Quest, and one was by SPI and the other was by Avalon Hill. So it was Dragon Quest. Oh, Powers and Perils. Yeah, I tried those, and I tried Lords of Creation, which I do not recommend. And of course, Traveler. I've always liked Traveler. I consider that a different beast. And eventually I stumbled upon, through my friend Ernie, Man to Man, which became GURPS. And GURPS was all, you didn't roll a character, you created a character, and you had advantages and disadvantages and character quirks. And I found that the characters you got from there were much more balanced and much more interesting. The first character I played in GURPS, it wasn't GURPS, it was Man to Man, but the first character I played there couldn't lie. It was a female. She just couldn't lie. And she was a pacifist. She could not attack first. She could only attack in self-defense or defense of others. And it fit the character. And did she have advantages? She had an advantage. I don't remember what it was, but whatever. Like I said, I found it created more interesting characters, and I played GURPS for years, mainly because of that, and it was eventually Fudge that moved me away. And really the only thing I didn't like about GURPS is that it had just grown and grown and grown. I had started with the first edition, which was 2 little paperback books. Then second edition came out, and that was 2 slightly bigger books, and now they had cardboard covers, because first edition was all just paper. Even the covers were paper. And then third edition was this big perfect bound book, and then there was like third edition revised or whatever, and that was an even bigger book. And then they added 2 expansion books on top of it, and I was like, no, this is too much. And fortunately, I started looking for something free. The internet was something new and wild back then. There was a list server called Free RPGs. You would pretty much do it by email, and it would send you a free RPG, and that's how I found Fudge, and I fell in love with Fudge, and that became my go-to game for years and years. We're getting off topic. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm going to wrap this one up here. My timer says a half hour. Hopefully I'll be able to trim this down some. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you next week. James and I should be recording. We're going to do another feedback episode. And like I said, we're trying to get through all the feedback we're going through. And then we're working on a review. I dug up my copy of an old book that I thought James had shown me back in high school. And he says he had no memory of it, but he thought it looked interesting, so he actually bought a copy. And I think I even want to do a giveaway, because I like this book that much, at least my memories of it are that great, that I would love to do a giveaway. But I need to figure out how that's going to work. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling. It's late. I need to be up really early to work tomorrow, so I'm signing off, and I will see you next week. Bye. You have been listening to the Decahedron Podcast. Send email to feedback@decahedron.com. Remember to spell decahedron with a K. Voice feedback can be sent through the Anchor website or by calling 562-RPG-CAST. That's 562-774-2278. Links are in the show notes. Music is courtesy of Kabim Cloud, logo by Design Cat. Thanks for listening.